The studio was filled with tension you could almost taste. This wasn't just any political panel. It was the Global Stability Summit, live in front of millions. Leaders from every continent were seated under bright lights, cameras rolling. Among them sat Captain Ibrahim Traoré, calm, composed, and proud, wearing his traditional camouflage uniform and signature beret. Just 2 seats away, Donald Trump. Loud, grinning, unfiltered. The moderator asked a simple question about African youth and global leadership. Traoré answered with passion. He spoke softly but firmly about African dignity, independence, and building a future without exploitation. The crowd nodded. Even some Western leaders leaned in. But then, out of nowhere, Trump leaned into his mic and laughed. "That guy sounds like Ghetto Trash. Who let him in this room?" The studio froze. Silence. Even the cameras paused, as if reality needed time to catch up. Traoré didn't flinch. He blinked once. The African delegates stiffened in their seats. A woman in the crowd dropped her pen. The insult was louder than Trump's voice. And then, the storm began to brew. Ibrahim Traoré didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than Trump's insult. His eyes locked onto Trump, not with anger, but with something more painful. Disappointment. Chuck Schumer shifted uncomfortably. Across the table, France's delegate whispered something into his aide's ear. Cameras zoomed in. Everyone was waiting for the African leader to explode. But he didn't. Instead, Traoré reached for his water, took a sip, and gently set the glass down. The quiet was brutal. A young African student in the audience began to cry. She had flown from Ghana to attend this summit. She had looked up to Traoré as her symbol of pride. And now, her hero had just been insulted on live TV. A man behind her whispered, "Why would Trump say that?" Traoré finally spoke, but not to Trump. He looked at the moderator and said, "Africa is not trash. Africa is the beginning." A long pause, then a single clap, then another. Slowly, the audience began to rise. But before the applause could grow, a voice cut through it like thunder. Chuck Schumer had leaned forward. He adjusted his glasses, and he looked like he was about to burn the studio down. Chuck Schumer's voice didn't shout, but it sliced like a razor. "Mr. Trump," he said, "I have been in politics longer than most people in this room have been alive. I've seen disrespect, I've seen ignorance, but what you just said is beyond disgusting." Trump leaned back in his seat, arms crossed. The smirk gone. Schumer wasn't done. "You insulted a man who is rebuilding his nation while dodging drones, a man who sleeps 3 hours a night to protect his people, while you insult from gold towers and golf courses." The audience held their breath. Cameras were still. Even the cameramen had stopped moving. "You called him Ghetto Trash?" Schumer's voice cracked. "That's not a political statement, that's hate. And hate has no place on this stage. Not in 2025, not anymore." Traoré looked down, only for a moment. Emotion flickered in his eyes. A member of the UN whispered, "This is historic." And in that 60 seconds, Donald Trump said nothing, not a word. The world had just witnessed something rare, truth-winning, live on air. But the internet, it was just getting started. By the next morning, the clip had hit 87 million views. And Africa was on fire. Radio stations in Ghana, Senegal, South Africa, and beyond played the audio over and over. Talk shows broke down every frame. In Ouagadougou, mothers watched the moment in silence. Fathers shook their heads in rage. Children asked, "Why did he call our president trash?" In Nairobi, a boy named Daniel asked his teacher what ghetto trash meant. The teacher cried in front of the entire class. But Traoré, he stayed quiet. No press release, no tweet, nothing. Behind closed doors, his advisor begged him to respond. He looked at her and said, "If I shout back, I become him. I'll wait. The world is watching. But deep down, something was breaking. Because Traoré had heard those words before, years ago. Long before he was president, words like dog, useless, jungle boy. And for the first time in years, those memories came back. He didn't show it on stage, but that night, he sat alone in his hotel room and cried. At 2:13 a.m., there was a knock on Traoré's door. Not security, not press, just a woman. She looked nervous, early 60s, holding a tan envelope. "I'm sorry, President Traoré. I was at the summit. I'm not important, just a translator, but I heard what he said, and I think you should see this." He opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a photograph, black and white. It showed a young African soldier, barefoot, standing with two kids in a village destroyed by war. The soldier had a name on his uniform, Traoré. Ibrahim gasped. "That's my father." The woman nodded, eyes glistening. "He saved my mother in Mali. Americans never knew. He wasn't trash. He was a hero." She handed him a second photo, his father treating an injured French child with only a cloth and charcoal. "Please tell his story, tell yours. People need to know." Traoré couldn't speak. His mouth trembled. His hands shook. This wasn't politics anymore. It was legacy, and something in him shifted. The pain wasn't gone, but now he had a reason to stand taller. Meanwhile, back in Washington, Chuck Schumer sat in his office, eyes red from lack of sleep. His staff kept saying, "The moment is viral." But Chuck wasn't celebrating. He was furious. He had served under 8 presidents. He had seen racism dressed up as policy. But this was personal. He called Ibrahim privately. Traoré answered softly, "Mr. Schumer, Captain, I meant what I said. I know." There was a long pause. Then Chuck's voice broke. "I saw my grandson cry after the broadcast. He asked me why Trump hates brown people. I couldn't answer, but I told him, 'You were a good man.'" Traoré's throat tightened. Chuck continued, "You don't owe him a response, but maybe the world needs one. They'll twist it. Then speak in a way they can't twist. Speak with truth, with proof, with your father's story." Chuck sighed. "You've won people's hearts, Captain. Don't let them forget why." They hung up. Ibrahim stood by the window, watching the Paris skyline. Outside, a soft rain began to fall. Inside, a fire had just been lit. That night, as the hotel lights dimmed in Paris, Ibrahim sat by the window, holding the photograph of his father. And then, quietly, the pain came rushing back. He remembered being 8. The time he and his mother waited 6 hours in a Red Cross line for a bag of rice. He remembered how a foreign soldier had shoved her aside and called her jungle woman. He had clenched his fists, but he was just a boy. That was the day he told his mother, "One day I'll wear a uniform, but I'll never wear their hate." She had kissed his forehead and whispered, "Then never become them, my son." And now, all these years later, that same hate had followed him to a global summit. But so had that promise. Ibrahim looked at the photo again. "You weren't trash, Baba," he whispered. "You were fire." And with that, he opened his laptop. He typed a single tweet. "They insulted my skin. They mocked my roots. But I do not kneel. My father's blood walks with me." The internet exploded. But something even more powerful was already beginning, in places no one expected. In a quiet classroom in Atlanta, Georgia, 9-year-old Malik sat staring at the projector screen. His teacher had played a news clip showing Traoré's calm after the insult. She wanted to teach empathy, not politics. But when Trump's voice said "Ghetto Trash," Malik dropped his pencil. The room went silent. "Miss Carter, does that mean I'm trash too?" The teacher's eyes filled with tears. She knelt beside him, hugged him, and whispered, "Never. You are gold." But Malik didn't believe her. Not yet. He went home that day and found Traoré's speech online. He watched it 10 times. Then he saw Chuck Schumer's reply. His favorite part? You insulted a man who protects his people while you hide behind golf courses. Malik smiled for the first time that day. He opened a notebook and wrote, "One day I want to be like Captain Traoré." His mother found it later and wept. She posted a photo of his note on Facebook. Within hours, it went viral. People weren't just reacting now. They were reflecting. Traoré had become more than a man. He was becoming a mirror, and people were finally seeing what they'd ignored for too long. In Burkina Faso, there were no angry protests, no burning flags, no shouting mobs, just silence. On the streets of Ouagadougou, women wore black scarves. Taxi drivers painted Traoré's face on their bumpers. Children in villages marched barefoot, holding hand-drawn signs. "We are not trash." The silence was louder than screams. At midnight, all power went out across the country, on purpose. 1 minute of total darkness. Then, all across Burkina Faso, candles lit up windows. It was the people's way of saying, "We remember, we see you, we stand behind you." African leaders from Kenya, South Africa, Mali, and Ghana released a joint statement. Captain Traoré represents the strength of a continent that will no longer accept humiliation. We stand with him and with every child watching. Even a South African rapper released a tribute track titled "Not Your Trash." It hit 3 million plays in a day. The Western media scrambled to explain the movement, but they didn't start it. The people did. And Traoré? He stayed quiet. But he knew now. This wasn't just about him. It was about the 8-year-old boy inside him, and the millions like him still waiting to be seen. At 7:48 a.m., a whistleblower sent an anonymous email to journalists across the world. Subject line, "For Traoré's eyes only." Inside was a single PDF. It was an internal memo from a senior official in the U.S. State Department, dated 3 days before the global panel. One paragraph stood out. "Trump is likely to provoke Traoré. If he does, let him. The reaction will split public opinion and draw attention away from African sovereignty issues. We advise minimal interference." The leak was a bomb. CNN hesitated. Al Jazeera posted it instantly. Within hours, hashtags like "Trash, you planned disrespect" and "You played yourselves" trended in over 30 countries. Traoré's team denied having seen it before. But Chuck Schumer, he read it live on MSNBC and then slammed his notes down. This wasn't ignorance, it was strategy. People were outraged. What was once seen as a careless insult now looked like a coordinated attempt to provoke and humiliate a rising African voice. And once that truth came out, even Trump's own circle began to feel the heat. But no one expected who would break ranks next. Her name was Senator Grace Mendez, a Republican from Arizona. She had stood with Trump for years, smiled beside him, campaigned with him. But on that Friday morning, she walked into a CNN studio without makeup, visibly shaken. She was holding a printed version of Malik's school note. "One day I want to be like Captain Traoré." Her hands trembled as she spoke. "I have a son with African roots, and when he saw that clip, he cried. He thought Trump was talking about him." She paused, voice cracking. "I voted for Trump, but this was evil, and I can't be part of it anymore." Across America, people gasped. This wasn't about left or right anymore. This was about right or wrong. And now the lines were blurring. Within minutes, 3 more senators issued statements. 2 quietly removed Trump photos from their websites. But for Ibrahim, he still hadn't responded directly. He was planning something else. Not a press release, not a tweet, but a moment. One that would come from the heart and leave the world speechless. Paris, Saturday afternoon. Rain fell lightly on the stone streets. Ibrahim Traoré canceled all his interviews. No guards, no convoy, no cameras. He wore a plain black jacket, just another face in the crowd. He walked into a small museum tucked between cafes. Inside was a temporary exhibit on colonial resistance in Africa. The curator, startled, asked if he needed help. "No," Traoré said gently. "I just want to feel." He walked past photos of men who looked like him, bound in chains. He saw drawings of children sent to war without shoes. He saw one name carved into stone, Moussa Traoré, a soldier who died defending his village. He sat down on a bench, tears falling quietly. A little girl approached him. "Are you Captain Traoré?" He nodded. She hugged him tight. "You make me feel brave." He couldn't speak. She didn't need him to. Someone took a photo. It spread like wildfire. No speech, no press. Just a black man sitting in front of history, holding the future in his arms. That single photo got 109 million views in 24 hours. And it wasn't even the climax. That was still coming. It arrived folded in a brown envelope, left quietly at the hotel front desk. No name, just a wax seal marked Bobo Dioulasso 1989. Inside was a handwritten letter. Traoré sat down slowly, his fingers trembling. "To my son Ibrahim, if you're reading this, I am likely gone." It was his father's handwriting. He had never seen this letter before. "I once wore the uniform to protect our land. Not from bombs, but from shame. They called me a savage when I treated wounded white soldiers. I stayed silent. But if you ever rise, and they insult you, don't fight with fists, fight with truth. Let them hear our silence and feel our dignity louder than their voices." Tears rolled down Traoré's cheeks. "My son, Africa's pride is buried deep. You must dig it out, even if they bury it again and again." The last line shattered him. "Never forget, we are not ghetto. We are gold they fear." He held the letter to his chest, sobbing quietly. Outside, Paris lights flickered against the window. Inside, something more powerful than rage began to take root. Purpose. In a dusty village near Kaya, Burkina Faso, a 10-year-old boy named Abdoulaye heard about what had happened to Traoré. He had no TV, no phone, just an old radio his uncle fixed with wire and gum. When he heard that the president was insulted on live TV, he stood up, left the house, and started walking. No shoes, no food, just a small water bottle and a note tucked in his shirt. He walked 9 miles through red earth, across fields and rocky paths, until he reached a small police checkpoint. The officer stopped him. "Where are you going, little one?" "To the capital. I want to give something to the president." The officer read the note. It said, "You are not trash. You are my reason to dream." The officer didn't speak. He knelt, wiped the boy's dusty feet, and made a call. By nightfall, Abdoulaye was on a plane to Ouagadougou. That story hit social media like a tidal wave. Millions reposted it. Influencers cried reading it. African grandmothers recorded videos in local dialects blessing the child. And when Traoré finally met Abdoulaye, neither could speak. They just hugged, and the world wept. The French government offered Traoré time on national TV. He refused. Instead, he asked to speak from Place de la République, the very plaza where black migrants were once beaten during protests. There would be no script, no teleprompter, only a mic, a camera, and the weight of an entire continent. As the time neared, world media lined up. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, even Fox News. Malik, the little boy from Atlanta, sat beside his mom holding her hand. Abdoulaye was in the front row holding his "You are my dream" sign. Traoré walked toward the platform in silence. One security officer whispered, "Are you ready?" He replied, "I was born ready, but not for me. For them." Chuck Schumer flew in quietly and sat in the back row. A Senegalese singer began humming a soft national melody. Then the world went quiet. 12 different languages were ready for translation. Across the world, TVs glowed in living rooms, classrooms, buses, and coffee shops. What would he say? Would he cry? Would he shout? No one knew. But one thing was clear. When Traoré opened his mouth, the world was about to listen. He stood before the crowd, wind brushing lightly across his coat. Captain Ibrahim Traoré looked straight into the lens. And then he began. I was called Ghetto Trash, not for what I did, but for what I am. He paused. A black man, an African, a son of a farmer, a child who knew hunger, who shared school books, who was told he would never matter. He looked down briefly, then up again. But I stand here not to defend myself. I stand here for every child whose accent was mocked, for every woman silenced in boardrooms, for every country told it was nothing more than a charity case. Malik cried in the front row. Abdoulaye pressed his letter to his chest. They wanted me to get angry, to lose myself. But I remember my father's words. We don't scream to be seen. We walk in truth, and they will feel us in silence. The plaza was completely still. I am not trash. I am the soil that grows hope. And Africa, we are not your burden. He closed the speech simply. We are not asking to belong. We already do. The applause shook the world. Back in New York, Donald Trump sat alone, watching the speech replay on TV. He didn't say a word. His advisors had already quit. His phone buzzed with messages, some hateful, some confused. But he ignored them all. He stared at the screen where Traoré stood tall, tears still drying on his cheeks, with millions clapping around him. And for the first time in years, Trump said nothing. No tweet, no press conference, no spin. Only silence. Across America, even his supporters were reflecting. A viral video showed a former Trump voter removing a campaign bumper sticker. Under it, they wrote in chalk, "Respect is stronger than power." Chuck Schumer visited Traoré privately that evening. They didn't talk about politics. They just shared tea. And when Schumer stood to leave, he said, "What you did today wasn't for Africa alone. You reminded the world what it means to carry dignity." Traoré smiled quietly. We've carried pain long enough. It's time we carry each other. And with that, history was sealed. Not with a punchline, but with purpose. That night, in every country across Africa, something magical happened. One by one, people lit candles, in streets, on porches, in shops, and in homes with no electricity. Families held up lights to the sky in silence, no speeches, no flags, just fire and hope. Abdoulaye held a small candle with his mother. Malik did the same in Atlanta. A girl in Haiti, a grandmother in Congo, a student in India, a priest in Mexico, a survivor in Gaza, all lighting up the darkness together. Traoré watched from his hotel rooftop in Paris. A reporter asked him, "Do you think this will change the world?" He replied, "No, but I think the world just saw itself clearly for the first time in a long time." The final shot captured his face in the candlelight. Hurt but healing, soft but unshakable. If this story moved you, if it made you cry, if it reminded you what real leadership looks like, please like this video so more people see it. Tell us in the comments what part hit your heart the hardest. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Your voice matters, your presence matters, and together, we can light up the world.